under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As always, we begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather as the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land through the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. As I said at the top, this is a study session, so there will be no action taken on any items tonight. But we will start then with the roll call. And did you want to go ahead with that?
Yes, good evening, Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Shaw.
Here.
Commissioner Stanley. Commissioner Treadwell.
Here.
Commissioner Werner.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson.
I am here.
And Mayor Shamrow.
Here, and we'll continue with announcements from the city manager, please.
Thank you, Mayor Shamrow. I have a few announcements this evening. The Human Rights Commission is seeking nominations for the Sarah Hardy Humanitarian Award and the Business Organization Humanitarian Efforts Award. Nomination forms can be found on the city's website under the Human Rights Commission. The city continues to do work on the strategic planning project. Currently, the plan is being drafted for public input, but with over 1,200 recently completed community surveys, we encourage the public to read through the data and stay engaged and informed. Information can also be found on the city's website under projects. A reminder to the public to save the date for April 30th for the Senior Center and Park Grand Opening Celebration. The event will run as an open house style from 2 to 6 p.m. And lastly, the Governmental Center offices are closed this Friday, April 18th.
Okay, any announcements from the city clerk?
Yes, some meetings to announce for this week, the week of April 14th, 2025. The Planning Commission will have a study session that's on Tuesday, April 15th at 6 p.m. in the Commission Chambers. The Joint Planning Commission, that's the Grand Traverse Commons Joint Planning Commission, will meet on Wednesday, April 16th. That's at 5:15 p.m. in the training room on the second floor of the Governmental Center. We are seeking volunteers to help power city government by serving on a number of different boards and committees. Those include Human Rights Commission, Local Officers Compensation Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, and Brown Bridge Advisory Committee. Anyone interested in serving is encouraged to contact the city clerk's office to find out more, as well as to submit their application. Just a couple of community updates. The leaf and brush pickup is scheduled to begin on Monday, April 28th, and they'll begin on the west side of the city, and only one pass will take place. And more information as far as particulars on leaf and brush pickup that begins on Monday, April 28th can be found at the city's website. And then a reminder that the city issues a weekly e-newsletter called the Bay Brief, and folks can sign up for that digital newsletter at traversitymi.gov. And lastly, just a reminder to everyone up here to speak directly into the microphone so folks can hear you. And that's all that I've got.
Thank you. With that, we'll start with our first item of business. Commissioner Anderson requested a time to put a presentation out about short-term rentals. So please go ahead with that.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe everyone here is aware of the work of the Planning Commission. They have been considering some changes that would reduce the share of short-term rentals that are allowed in buildings within certain commercial and developmental zones. The purpose of this discussion is to find out if there is enough interest among this commission to form an ad hoc committee to explore short-term rental regulations that don't involve the issues of land use or zoning. So there are just a few items that I hope we can touch upon. First off, the trends in short-term rentals and licensing within the city, what our current regulations of short-term rentals look like, some of the tools that other communities have been using to regulate either ownership of short-term rentals or operations of short-term rentals, and then a conversation about what our next steps might be. So first, let's take a look at the current state of short-term rentals in Traverse City. And this comes from the Planning Department's annual report for 2024. They are reporting that during last year, we issued 542 licenses to operate short-term rentals. And just for context, there are a total of about 8,400 dwelling units within the city. And so that means that about 6.4% of all of our dwellings are currently being used as short-term rentals. The thing that struck me was that that's considerably more than the number of permits that were issued for new dwellings to be constructed last year, which was 373. And they also provided some historical data about the trends in the number of short-term rentals that have been licensed since 2019, when we first began that process. We have been hearing some anecdotal reports about saturation in the short-term rental market in Traverse City. So if you break out new licenses, brand newly issued, from licenses that have been renewed from year to year, it looks like new licenses are considerably more popular, or at least they're growing faster, than renewal licenses. Between 2023 and 2024, our number of new licenses rose from 34 to 101, whereas our renewal licenses grew less than 10%, from 419 to 438. So I don't have enough data to really interpret that accurately, but I think it's fair to say that the growth in the total number of licenses has also slowed. You know, we're at, this data said 539, and it was about a 19% increase year over year. Previously, we'd been growing at about twice that clip. So, you know, there may indeed be some slowing in the market and the impact, but it's still significant. So, currently, what do we regulate? Well, we require an annual license, and it has been charged $200 for the cost of that license since they began in 2019. We require that a short-term rental owner carry $1 million per occurrence liability insurance. We require that the short-term rental be located in an approved zone, and you'll notice that none of the approved zones are residential. We require a fire inspection. There's a self-inspection process with the application for a license, and then the city has a goal to physically inspect short-term rentals at least once every 3 years. And then there are requirements that certain notices be posted, like a fire escape plan and our city noise and firework rules, and a copy of the license be posted in the unit itself. Now, one of the things that I discovered that I found very interesting is that even though short-term rentals are currently exempt from the bed tax that occupants of hotels and motels pay, unless it's part of a significant-sized group of short-term rentals, there is a House bill currently in committee. It was introduced last year, and it would add a level of oversight of short-term rental licensing by LARA, which is the State Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Group, and it would institute a 6% excise tax on short-term rental revenues, of which 5% of that 6% would go to local government units like Traverse City. And if that actually makes it into law, this could become a source of revenue for the city to help to cover some of the infrastructure and the public service costs that we incur as a result of hosting short-term rental guests. So I did some real preliminary checking into what other communities have done in terms of regulating their short-term rentals, and they tend to fall into two buckets. One of them is regulating ownership, and the other is regulating operations. And in terms of ownership, there are some communities that, for instance, require the owner of a short-term rental to actually reside in the local governmental area where the short-term rental is located, or to have a designated local responsible party. Some of them impose limits upon transfer of that license, so that the license to operate essentially goes with the person, the owner, rather than the piece of property. Some of them will limit the number of units that can be owned by any particular short-term rental owner. Some of them have quite a bit more aggressive fee structures in terms of annual licensing. And there's one that really kind of caught me by surprise. Out in Sedona, Arizona, they're actually paying a financial incentive to owners who are willing to transfer their short-term rentals and convert them into long-term rentals. So if you have a studio apartment that you're using as a short-term rental, the city would pay you $6,000 as an incentive to convert that to a long-term rental. In terms of operations, these sorts of regulations seem to be a bit more common. Many communities are defining a minimum duration of stay, whether it's a 2-day stay at least or a 4-week stay at least, but attempting to slow down the turnover of short-term rental guests. They set guidelines for the maximum number of occupants per unit. They set parking requirements. Some of them will only allow hosted stays. So the owner or designated responsible party is literally on premise for the duration of the stay. And some of them have neighbor notification regulations. So my question to all of you is, this is just a start in terms of, lifting up a few rocks and finding out what some of the possibilities might be. But what I'd like to know from you all is whether there's enough interest on the part of the commission to form an ad hoc committee and consider changes to our current short-term rental ordinance, which within the spectrum of options is a relatively hands-off sort of regulation. I would see that the ad hoc would want to do much deeper research into the regulatory approach of other communities, both near and far, and what kind of results they've had. I think that the committee would want to explore how we might be able to generate some revenue from the fact that we host almost 600 short-term rentals within our 8 square miles, and how that revenue might be used, whether it's to cover infrastructure or public safety and service costs, or even whether it could contribute to an affordable housing fund, or something else that has been on our wish list that we really haven't found a source of funding for yet. So that's my pitch, and I'd love to hear from all of you as far as what do you think about forming a committee?
Well, before we get into that, I have some questions, because we didn't, and I know that this was presented by you, you're not staff, and we just got this, I basically have seen this presentation for the first time tonight. The numbers that you're using, do those include hosted? Because under our regulations as a city, I believe that everything that's short-term, including hosted, are all under the same numbers.
Actually, my understanding is that it doesn't include tourist homes.
Okay.
That it just includes,
Is that,
and
Yeah,
our
that
tourist
sounds
homes
exactly
are
right.
that's where I
the
was trying to
hosted
clarify.
ones.
Also, I wanted to say, and you did mention Sedona on one, some of the examples that, and I say this because we went through the overhaul in, I think it was 18.
Yes.
Tim, you would have been there. But we know that for a fact that in the state of Michigan, we are limited by how much we can charge on a fee because we can't make money off of it. that we can't, there's a lot of things that we can't do. So some of these examples that were out there for us to be discussed did get brought up in that, and the legislation hasn't changed, as well as that one from 2024, that died in lame duck. I think technically it's still floating around. There are other initiatives out there being discussed right now, and that's where, those changes could make a significant difference to the conversation we could have going forward. I know there's one group here working on just carving out Traverse City, kind of like Detroit did a few years ago. There's others that are talking about more of this shared approach statewide. So I just wanted to kind of clarify some of these, because what I'd love to see, before we get too far, is I appreciate the presentation, but I kind of more of the citations and backgrounds on it. And I know you were kind of putting together, and I get that, but I think right now, those are a lot of very, very broad things that you could probably have an ad hoc on for 2 years. And there'd be changes in the legislature the whole time. So I'm curious about some of the data sets that you used. I have no doubt that they are correct, but to get some of that information and those definitions as we ponder some of these questions. So that was my 2 cents at the top that I wanted to clarify, so thank you.
Good, thank you. Other comments, any questions, interest?
Is that hand kind of up, Mitch? Sorry.
Yes.
Doing zero.
I don't know if Lauren or Ben or anybody else has a ready answer to it, but as you already brought up, Amy, Mayor Shamrow,
It's fine.
we do have limitations in how much we can charge for fees. It seems that Peninsula Township has recently found a way that they can assess much higher fees, and I am curious if they, as a township, are operating under a different legal structure or something else.
I don't know. Generally, I don't know what Peninsula Township has done recently. I haven't kept up on it. Generally, the rule is that if there's a fee for something like a permit, the person getting the permit is paying for whatever service they're getting in receiving that permit. And so if you push too far as a municipality into the idea of just raising funds with permit fees, you run the risk of having that challenged as a hidden tax, and that can be kind of clawed back in the courts. So there's a balance to be struck there. I'd be interested to look at Peninsula and see what they've done, but that's the balance that we have to try to keep.
And that was how our fee structure was created back in 18, right? Yeah. Heather, you had your hand up? Or we're starting to talk, sorry.
Yeah, I'm interested in looking at that we have more short-term rental licenses than we have permits for new dwellings. I find worrisome. Incentives to turn short-term rentals into long-term rentals, I think, is interesting.
Well, I would ask, can we do that, Lauren? Because that was in Sedona, and Michigan has very interesting laws.
Well, there may be ways. I mean, there are some of those newer housing incentives that we talked about a while ago that came through with the new pilot legislation that we could look at. So there may be ways of, structuring, tax types of incentives, but just, I don't know. I don't know the answer as I sit here, but you're right, Mayor. Arizona has some different things going on than we do. I mean, Arizona does have, basically, the legislature in Arizona preempted municipalities from regulating short-term rentals and sort of threw the door wide open on that market. And so it's, in a way, not super surprising that they're trying to kind of claw that back some now, because the municipalities had no, even zoning or anything, any of those local controls that would normally be there as a menu of options were taken away by the legislature in Arizona.
And as
I
much as,
think afterwards they had buyer's remorse. I
and
think.
as much as I like to point out how Michigan's laws are very antiquated on some of these things and very tying, thankfully that kind of legislation has failed in in our legislature like for the last 5 years. So fingers crossed, and everybody stay diligent that we don't keep doing that. But really quick to clarify though, that would be more, and I have been actually waiting for this to kind of progress, that's more of a pilot discussion, those new pieces,
Sure.
rather than a short-term rental, correct? Because we'd have to have the policies in place to allow for that to be issued.
We would have to, but it could.
Right.
Enter the conversation of converting what may have been built as short-term rentals into long-term housing. That could be part of that conversation.
Go ahead,
I
Heather.
have something else, too.
Yeah.
I'm also very concerned by non-homesteaders buying homes and converting them into short-term rentals. We have rentals all over town. They're everywhere, but they're mostly long-term rentals, and they're homes that are owned by people who live in Traverse City and just have purchased homes as an investment over time. But buyers coming in from outside the area, buying a home and just renting out as short-term rentals, like a predatory.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, back to the incentives to convert. I might be conflating, and maybe it's one of the pilots, but in Charlevoix, they're doing something as far as the conservation easement equivalent, so that, and maybe this isn't the city proper, maybe there has to be an outside entity that's making it happen, but I'm certainly interested in the conversations of what might be allowed and what might be possible, even if it's creative, especially if somebody's doing something already or attempting to here in Michigan. Yeah, generally, I'm more intrigued by ownership tools than operational, and I think that's kind of what I'm hearing. Like, I'm willing to listen more about maximum units owned. Like, I don't know whether we're bumping up against anything that on that front, but I know other communities have. Yeah, the local residency, I'm willing to listen more, but but anyhow, so I'm more interested in the ownership tools, especially incentives, because if our goal is more long-term rentals, like that to me is a more proactive thing, the potential there. And then I am supportive of what I think will be coming from the Planning Commission.
Really quick, Mitch had his hand up, and then Mark.
Yes, I am also interested in what incentives are available, or legal, financial, tax-based, otherwise, to facilitate conversion, because what we have right now is, yes, there is continued growth of new licenses, but we also have people that have licenses right now that we hear aren't using them as short-term rentals, that might have converted it to long-term rentals, because at least they can get more occupancy now, and that generates better revenues, certainly more consistent revenues. But they are holding on to the license because they think that the market could shift at some point in the future. So it is right now a long-term rental, and if the city had some tool that could say, yes, it will stay a long-term rental, that would be advantage to the city's advantage on this issue, I think, and it could lead to the numbers of permits being out there that actually reflect what are used for short-term rental purposes.
Mark?
Mitch just hit on something that I was going to ask, but the other is, one, having too big of fees could, you said, inch towards having a hidden tax.
An excise.
What could we explore that would be more transparent, and so a not hidden tax? And then to tag on to what Commissioner Treadwell just said about the incentives for homeowners to convert back to long-term, maybe not always financially, but like technical support. I would think of like either management or legal. A lot of apprehension is when you have somebody, it's great if you have a good tenant, but if you have a bad tenant, sometimes you don't know for several months before they've destroyed your property, whereas short-term, within a week, you know if somebody's done something or not, and you can fix it.
That's a good point. One thing I just want to say right now, that what we're kind of bumping up against is some of the ideas that people have kind of mentioned a couple times. The local residency, I'm curious, Lauren, maybe you know off the top of your head, or maybe you have to investigate. Is that something we are allowed to dictate, or is that interfere with property rights under?
I'd have to look at that. I'd have to look at it.
Okay. I heard you about to say my gut says, and you stopped yourself, so I
I
will
did
let you look
stop
at
myself.
it. The other thing that I'm hearing, and I think this is, and whether this ends up in an ad hoc or not, I think this falls kind of squarely on Lauren, is maybe bring us back a report, if nothing else, on these smaller pilots that got brought up when we were talking about the workforce housing pilots
Yeah.
about a year and a half ago. The taxing fee structures, what kind of give do we have? Is there any change on that? And then the incentives, again, I'm just going back, and we haven't had this conversation for a few years, but I haven't heard of a lot of positive changes at the legislature that gives us more tools than what we had before. But if there's, we're always tracking legislation too, and I know we have these conversations up here and want, people to look to us to have the answers, but if Lansing's tying our hands on this, sometimes it's good, though, to hopefully get people more engaged, so they're reaching out to their reps and senators, state reps and senators, to say, hey, this bill's in lame duck, why aren't you guys voting on it? It's a gimme, why aren't we getting short-term rental fees, taxes that we're sharing with the state or other municipalities, things like that. So I definitely wanted to highlight that that's something that's kind of been some loose threads out there that this is pulling together for us while we're going through, so I'm not like trying to summarize 85 things at the end of all of this, so.
Well, and I think a lot of the conversation here maybe points out that we last touched our short-term rental regulations ordinance in 2018, and it went into effect in 2019, and that's 7 years ago. Maybe it's time to just take a look at it now that we understand a bit more about how the short-term rental market in Traverse City has evolved, and look at ways to, whether there are ways to encourage long-term rentals out of this. We talk about the gap in affordable rental properties and how many additional units we as a city would like to have in our purview. And gosh, here's this pot of almost 600 rental units, and if there were ways to encourage transition from short-term to long-term, I would think that would be a very interesting benefit to the community.
I would agree with that. I think that's why I started with saying let's have Lauren look at the legalities of some of the things we brought up. The one thing I'm going to say, though, and you had it on your slide, and so I'm not trying to say it wasn't there, but to point it out. Well, first of all, because I'm not on Planning Commission, what zones are you guys looking at re-examining?
These are C and D zones primarily. I believe we're removing the option for short-term rentals in the I zone.
Okay, and so I bring that up because the zones that were mentioned in the slides not up were C, D on the slide, and then one that I couldn't identify the letters on.
Hotel resort.
And well, there was one in between, and then hotel resort, yeah. And so the one thing I want to point out as we're having this conversation is, and what we came back to in 18, and I'm not saying we can't re-examine, is that these are commercial zones. These are, if there's a apartment above a building down Front Street, is that going to suddenly become affordable housing? Or if we make it a long-term rental, is that something that somebody's going to live in 3 months of the year in the winter, which we see around here, or in the summer, and be gone all winter and not contributing to the economy, where maybe somebody who's up skiing at Boyne like Crystal or something, or Hickory Hills, come to beautiful Hickory Hills for the winter, might actually be using it more often. And so I think that's where I'm intrigued about this conversation, but I have fears that just creating one with a lot of big, broad ideas versus something specific being brought, like, we want to see, and that's why I'm curious, we have not all seen yet what's going to come out of the Planning Commission and had that debate up here. And so that's where I've been a little hesitant to say, oh, I'd love to see an ad hoc. I want to see us talk more about this in different levels. But I want to see what's coming from the Planning Commission, what we do with that as a body, because we've already seen we don't automatically take everything, what Lauren says we can do, and then what in between is there that we need to identify that we should have an ad hoc to study. And so that's kind of where my head's at. So help me if you're kind of seeing a bigger opportunity before the next month and a half, 2 months or so to reexamine this.
Yeah, well, I do expect, and Mitch, as you know, tomorrow night is when there'll be a vote of the Planning Commission on the adjustment of percentages within those C and D districts. And it seems to me that tracking these in parallel gives us an opportunity to have some synergy, you know, that we would end up having these better coordinated as opposed to, okay, let's do the zoning part of it and leave the ordinance part for later. I would like us to see us putting our best efforts forward on both sides of the equation.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, this might be a little too, it's not an ask, it's a thought that if somebody thinks, yeah, that's an interesting idea. But I'm interested partly in the trends, like you've got trends as far as percentages, but especially new builds and how many, you know, say an apartment or condominium building that we can consider multifamily housing, but say it has 30 units in it. Of the new builds in the past few years, like of the potential homes, how many are short-term rentals, how many are other, even if it's somebody's apartment and they only use it 3 months a year, versus how many short-term rental licenses are being issued for existing structures, wherever they might be, if it's over, you know, a second floor above a store on Front Street. Partly to, like, the conversation back in whatever year that was, got to, in the part of the reason we ended up on 25%, I think, was to try to use it as an incentive to make it allowed, but so that there would still be a large enough fraction, the 75%, that had the potential to feel like a community or a neighborhood in a building. So we kind of picked a number based on some experiences, I think, over at the Commons. So we were kind of projecting like what could happen, and is this an incentive to somebody to build because maybe it helps pencil out, et cetera, et cetera. So it's along those lines that I'm wondering, in what is being built these past few years, what's in there? I don't know what's in there. Like, I see new buildings, but I don't know, you know, of however many units, what fraction have applied for licenses. And it doesn't necessarily change. It's just, I feel like I'd be a little more informed, but if that's a big lift and effort by staff, then, you know, I'm not pushing for it.
Yeah, well, and I was just going to say, that's something I'd be interested in as well, but go ahead, Jackie.
I did request that.
Oh, okay.
And I was told that it would be
Would
more of a
probably take some
manual
time, yeah.
operation and
Yeah.
would take some staff time, so I didn't pursue it at that point.
Well, and I think to your, what I was thinking too, and Jackie, you just supported that, what I was thinking is, you know, I hear what you're saying about the parallel paths, but I think, you know, the zoning is coming through the Planning Commission and it will come to us. To me, rather than maybe having an ad hoc, at this point, the parallel path could be when that really comes to us for deliberation, we have some of these updated reports. Because to me, Tim, and maybe I'm hearing it wrong, what you were saying is like, almost we want an update on what we did in 18, right? These new builds, is the 25% helping? Is it not really making a difference and we're seeing people just build in districts where they can do 100%? So that's, I mean, to me, that would be hand in hand with making that decision about but I don't know that it needs an ad hoc to do it, though. Go ahead.
It just occurs to me that that's probably information you would want before you took action on the proposal from the planning.
Sorry, that's what I was saying. That's what I want in tandem, is not necessarily to have the ad hoc meet, but to get that information from staff. Sorry, I was not
Okay.
being clear on what I was
Thank you.
saying. Thank you. Yeah. So I think that's something that we could land on there, of kind of a update on 18 / how the potential changes that are being proposed by the Planning Commission kind of fall into all of that, that we would then have as part of our information for our decision process, as well as some of the legal things that Lauren will check up on. And again, I don't think this inherently means that we don't have an ad hoc coming. I think that what I'm kind of gauging from the filling in the pieces is that some of this is in play, and what do we really need to fill in at the end of the day, and that'll be clearer as we get some of this updated information, both about the taxing and incentive programs that might be available, as well as kind of updates on what we've already done in the past, and then from there, being able to take the next step forward. The parallel path to me doesn't seem like it'd be looking for a lot of the information that is already kind of starting at the Planning Commission, but also what we're going to look for when we have the deliberation.
Maybe I haven't done a good job of differentiating between the two, but I've been told at the Planning Commission level that the sorts of tools that we talked about tonight are absolutely outside the purview of the Planning Commission. They're not land use, they're not zoning.
Absolutely.
They're another creature entirely.
Absolutely, but I'm saying that could be the bigger conversation we have with the other information we've requested versus an ad hoc or 4 different study sessions on related topics that wouldn't help us inform on where we're going once we get that information from the Planning Commission, is what I'm kind of saying. Because I guess my point in all of this is I'm hesitant to say, yes, let's form yet another policy ad hoc, when it seems like some of this is just really wanting information that's out there, but in a, maybe not as like by April 14th, but we would like this presented to us. We're asking staff to have this information for us before we deliberate on these zoning changes.
Oh, so you're thinking that you would hold off on a decision on the proposal coming in from Planning Commission until
I'm
we
not
have
saying it's
done some more
inherently that, but I feel like
information
what I'm hearing here is that these are going to be questions we're going to ask when this comes up. So we might as well ask for the information ahead of time, knowing those are questions that we're going to ask from staff, rather than waiting and saying, having a study session and then saying, well, we're looking at taking them out of the, we're limiting the ones in the C district. Where are we at in the C district? We did 25% a few years ago. What did 25% get us now 7 years later? I feel like, what I'm hearing here are the questions that I feel like will spring up during that discussion. So let's tell staff ahead of time that we're probably looking at some of these questions, so we have them maybe more front-loaded.
And that would enable us to make a decision on the zoning proposal.
Potentially. I'm not saying it's inherent, but
But what, is there another channel for doing a relatively deep level of fact-finding about the non-zoning options, other than an ad hoc?
I mean, we could do it, but my question, I guess, going back, and again, sorry, we don't have it in our packet, so I can't remember exactly what was on the slide, but in some of those circles on your slide that I did like, that it's a very nice format you have, that I'm curious, because you said some people are doing this, some people are doing that, so to me, that would get into, a lot of those are ones I've heard float around over the years, and they're ones, oh, thank you, look at that. They're ones I've heard float around over the years, but we've been told that they're not legal in Michigan, or things like that. And so that's where I think like the first step to me would be having Lauren kind of looking at this presentation, looking at the legal points we've raised, and then potentially coming back and saying, you know what, out of these, I'm trying to do mental math with bubbles really quick, 10 bubbles, 3 of them are actually viable for us to do, and then maybe that's what an ad hoc could form to look at. But looking at it in this bigger context before we just say, here's 10 things, and have everybody saying, I've got this whole case study from Colorado, and I've got this one from Vermont, and none of them are legally applicable to us in Michigan at this point. So I'm not saying no to that. I'm saying, like, let's kind of initial fact-finding before the fact-finding, if that makes sense.
I think it does. So and a couple different kinds.
Yes.
One being asking for the data about the percentages and how that has actually played out in real life. And then also asking for a first blush legal assessment of
Some of the ideas.
what tools might be in our toolbox here locally.
I think that's perfect summary.
Okay.
And I would say too that, I would even consider some of this, to your point, and well put, is an update on work we've done in the past, right? We've done that periodically, like you said, we haven't touched it since 2018. It might be time just to review it. Well, the lens through which to review it might be this upcoming thing from Planning Commission. It doesn't mean that they're tie-barred, but it's a good time to have that conversation. So, does anybody else have anything they'd want to request that we talk about as part of this as well? Or do we think we kind of covered the good high level to come back
I think
to?
that's the place to start.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention, Jackie, and everybody else for participating. Much
Thank you
appreciated.
for the opportunity. I
All right.
appreciate it.
With that, we will move, oh, actually, because these are very disparate topics, I'll let people make a comment, if anybody wants to do public comment on the short-term rental evaluations or zoning. Does anybody have any public comment on that? You can approach the podium.
I'll state the rules for public comment. Please state your name and address. Indicate if you're a city resident, non-city resident, or city business owner. We have a 3-minute time allotment, and when your time is elapsed, the timer will beep, and we ask that all language be respectful to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Connor Miller, resident at 890 Boone Street, Traverse City. I am a Garfield Township resident, but I am also employed at Aspire North Realtors, located at 552 South Garfield Avenue in the city of Traverse City. So I would just like to take a moment to offer our association's support in evaluating what reasonable regulation of short-term rentals looks like in Traverse City. Our association, Aspire North Realtors, would be happy to provide data to assist in the evaluation of any positive and negative effects of short-term rentals on the Traverse City community. In fact, our association is currently working with our state Realtor Association, Michigan Realtors, and collaborating with local partners, Traverse City Tourism, Housing North, Traverse Connect, as well as the Michigan Short-Term Rental Association, in looking into conducting a research study on short-term rentals. This may actually expand beyond just our region, as the goal of this study is to provide objective, third-party research on the economic contributions and workforce housing impacts of short-term rentals. This information will help to direct local and state policy goals to maximize the benefits and minimize the harm of short-term rentals in a local, regional, and statewide level. We hope that Traverse City will partner with us to conduct this research study on short-term rentals and support an objective research study. We have appreciated, Commissioner Anderson, your call for data-based decision-making, and we ask that you work with us to gather the data necessary to inform you on any short-term rental policies that you may move forward with. We look forward to working with you to support reasonable regulation of short-term rentals in the Traverse City community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, please feel free to approach. You can also line up if you're going to speak too, so.
My name is Justin Reed. I'm a city resident. I'd like to say that you would if you create ad hoc, that would be two perspectives. You have the planning commission perspective and the city commission perspective. And so if you have two perspectives, it's kind of arguing the two out, and I would say wait for the planning commission's perspective on short-term rentals, and when it gets to you guys, then you guys go ahead and hammer it out, because it seems like an ad hoc would be much more work and game things that are much more chaotic versus something that could be done at the planning commission and then get to you guys. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Teresa Woods, and I own Visit Up North Vacation Rentals. That used to be Harris Properties, started back in 1970s. So I've been a part of this vacation rental community for a lot of years. Obviously, I didn't start it in the 70s. I'm not that old. But my father did, so I did answer the phone and everything else as a very young child. So I'm just here to say that there are so many misinformation points that are being thrown around about vacation rentals, especially the traditional vacation rental. And I came to all the meetings back, I think it was in 2010, I'd have to look back at all my notes, when they decided to do away with their traditional vacation rental here in the Traverse City area. And I've gone to hundreds of these meetings and tried to, give a perspective from another perspective sometimes. The hard part is it always depends on where you're at in your life, on how you feel about this situation. And, hearing things about people coming here and it's predatory of, coming from other areas to have a vacation rental. I grew up out by Sugarloaf, and it was probably 85% second homes at that time. I grew up, I'm 60, so, you know, tourism has always been a part of this community, both here in Leelanau County. We now have just a horde of people moving here. I lost quite a few vacation rentals during COVID because people moved up here to live because they could then work from home. There's this different thing with all these condos being built, and quite frankly, I'm not a fan of them because they are more typical for flooding the market with a lot of vacation rentals. Smaller, they don't have amenities. It's like a hotel room without amenities. So they're not really built for affordable housing. If you look at some of the prices, you know, if a $300,000 home condo is being offered at an investor's rate, 20% down, you're still paying $2,300 a month for that, and that is before the non-homestead tax. So when you get the non-homestead tax, plus you got to make a little, plus they beat up your place, you know, this is not affordable housing that they are building, you guys, and they're being allowed to build it, but then everybody's saying we don't want second home buyers. And if we have second home buyers, they're not going to hang out 12 months out of the year. They do come up. I mean, most of my owners, I would say 95%.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You can finish your
Thank you.
sentence, 95%.
Okay, 95% of my owners come to their homes quite a bit, and so they will never be long-term, and they're way too expensive. They're not affordable housing.
Thank you.
One last thing,
No,
if you
oh,
guys
I already
need-
gave you extra
No, I'm
time.
just saying, if you guys need to ever contact me, I would be more than happy to help.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? Okay, well, seeing none, again, there was no action on this because it's a study session, and now we'll move on to our presentation from Traverse Connect. And good news, Warren, you didn't lose anybody from the crowd, so everybody's excited for your presentation.
There you go, so just the arrows.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Camille. Camille from our team is going to start us off.
Thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity to present to you and for your continued partnership from the City Commission and from City Administration. Thank you all. So just before I dive into this slideshow, I wanted to remind you that we do, as part of our regular reporting through Traverse Connect, we do periodically provide you with status updates on our programs and initiatives. So that's including our quarterly growth barometer surveys, our twice-yearly economic ecosystem reports, and then our annual report as well. So I do hope you have time to review these reports. We won't go through all of those today, but I wanted to remind you of them, and we're happy to answer any questions about that, those reports and the information that we're sharing with you on a regular basis. So this evening, we want to focus on looking at what our shared goals in economic and community development are. So we'll look at some key priorities and some goals that are shared. We'll look at some challenges, and then we'll look at some proposed solutions to fulfill those shared goals. And then we'll also discuss some next steps in implementation and have time for questions and get your recommendations on a way to move forward. So just a refresher when it comes to some of our shared goals and objectives as it relates to economic development for both of our entities. The city has a number of goals which align with the work that we're doing. The city's stated goals are to help lead a shared regional economic and community development strategy, to foster regional collaboration to support community sustainability, to encourage development and vibrancy in commercial districts and corridors, and to build on success and incorporate ideas from the strategic action plan process. So we're very much in support of these development and sustainability goals. And where Traverse Connect comes in is that we want to continue to strengthen this partnership with the City of Traverse City. And also sort of going back 6 years when Traverse Connect was reconstituted in 2019, under the city's leadership and support at that point. The goal was to serve, for our role as an economic development organization, to serve as an extension for the public sector and for the city's team, so your team, when it came to economic development work. So Traverse Connect was actually specifically created because the city did not have an EDO department. So it's interesting to look back at that original goal setting. The point being, we have very much aligned interests here, and we're here to figure out how to support you as best as we can. Your strategic action plan, which is in the draft format, the 2030 strategic action plan formulated by Future IQ, that process has identified a number of important priorities for the city. So these jointly developed priorities are the culmination of a whole lot of hard work, collaboration, and all of that community-wide discussions and input, with all the stakeholders invited and encouraged to participate and contribute. And we had the opportunity to contribute to that too. So we're really positioned and excited to support the action plan, especially in the three key areas noted here. So these key priority areas. An equitable and sustainable future for city residents, to foster a regional collaborative approach, and then to build a thriving year-round economy. Those are all key priority areas where we can help, and they're areas that overlap with our expertise as an EDO. And I think, going to the sub-bullet points here, what's important to note is that this is work that is work to be done that is not what needs to be done in the future, but what's needed right now to address current situations. We already know that we have development pressures here. They're not going to go away, and we have development and growth happening. So where we can help is we can help to shape that growth. We can be thoughtful and intentional about what type of growth we see and how we develop our region. So here's what we're working with. We have a lot of really good data and inputs already. We've participated in the Future IQ sessions. Thank you for that. In the visioning sessions and the workshops. And then also over the past year, through our work with the Grand Traverse Economic Development Corporation, we've been given the opportunity to meet with the municipal leaders throughout the county, get their input via surveys, and then 7 separate workshops that we've hosted over the past year. And we're building on a unified prosperity plan for the county. And then we're also looking to build upon our existing metrics and our existing data and what we're tracking. So that's our economic development dashboard, which lives on our website, our quarterly growth barometer business surveys. And then we're always looking to national economic reports and rankings to benchmark ourselves and learn from best practices. So we have a lot of really good data and input here, and the opportunity to use that data to inform the way forward, and data and inputs that we can pull from. I'm going to hand it over to Warren now to address our key challenges and some proposed solutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Camille. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us with you this evening. As Camille indicated, this is a multi-step process that we've worked through with the city as a partner for a number of years, and so taking the next step with some of the information she's just provided, what we see here, that areas of key challenge areas where we believe we can best support and help the city. The first concern area is obviously the growth and change that we've all experienced in the community over the last, especially the last 25 years. The velocity of that, the trajectory of it, generates resistance, right? It is hard to deal with, especially when it's not always maybe the community's preferred type of growth. It's hard to and it's unfortunate when you experience growth pressures, but then those growth pressures come without some of the benefits, right? So if we see growth pressures that are coming to the city and coming to the region, but there aren't the commensurate improvements in some financial metrics like what we've listed here, then it becomes an even bigger issue, right? If we see lower employment in some of the higher paying sectors, if we see lower compensation per worker, lower real GDP per worker, then you've got kind of a doubly bad scenario where people are frustrated with growth pressures and and the local employment base is not seeing the full benefit that they could realize. We hear from a lot of community partners, and we understand the concerns about unfettered growth, and we are by no means here to champion or suggest unfettered growth. And I want to make that really clear, because both with our public sector and private sector partners, we hear those concerns. And a lot of other organizations, public sector organizations, private sector organizations, voice some of those same concerns. What we've seen in our work, and I think you also saw it from some of the work of Future IQ, that a focus on collaborative, controlled, sustainable development is what garners community support. And that's obviously something that we would want to support your efforts in. The second area of concern is the city's involvement in setting strategy. And I think this is something that's really come to the fore in a lot of discussions. To address your economic needs, the community's economic needs, the residents of the city's not fully benefiting from some of what I might consider the current uncoordinated strategy that we currently have. Because the city has not had as active of a voice over the last couple of years. And I think that what we saw through some of both our internal research as well as what you saw from Future IQ, there is concerns in the community about every municipality having kind of their own siloed approach, right? And so that's been the DNA of Traverse Connect from the very beginning, is to foster and support that regional collaboration, and we want to be part of that. Obviously, different municipalities in the region will have different approaches. They'll have different priorities and degrees to which they want to collaborate. But I think by taking a more leading role, the city has an opportunity to better position city residents so that their voices are better heard. I also think it goes to kind of an ancillary challenge that we sometimes see, which is, especially with public sector funding of economic development, right? It's kind of that question that always comes up. How do we know where we're having impact versus that project would have happened anyway? Right? That's always a question that comes up. I think that based on the data and the insights that Camille shared, I think that the city probably doesn't want to just kind of leave it to chance that hopefully the right things will happen, and forego having a voice in writing the story. So given those key challenges, we see a couple of areas, again, looking for where your goals overlap with what we can provide. We see a couple of solutions that we would help foster with the city. The first is to foster and lead a regional collaborative approach. That's obviously the goal that we've had since the city helped to form our original strategic plan back in 2019. It fits with your goals of implementing equitable and sustainable future. It addresses that kind of regional infrastructure and corridor needs so that the right development happens in the right places, and continue to enhance the statewide influence and the impact. Examples of that, we've seen in our Freshwater Research and Innovation Center, as well as the Fish Pass project, the opportunities for attracting established businesses, the opportunities for having early stage businesses that have kind of technology that's adjacent or complementary to those projects. Those are areas that we think that regional collaborative approach really shines through. I'd say the same for housing. So later this month, we'll be with legislators talking about housing initiatives, investments in permanent supportive housing, for example, that can help with homelessness situations, as well as advocating for a new program through MISHDA that allows employers to assist with employee housing support. So just a couple of ideas there and examples of the regional collaborative approach. And then, again, with helping to build a thriving year-round economy, that diversification of our local economy has been, again, at the forefront of what we've been trying to do since we were formed in 2019. We want to help residents realize improved compensation. We want our companies to be able to better attract top talent. And we want to support, obviously, the development of technology and sustainability, especially in advanced technologies. Some examples of that are the recent Advanced Aerial Mobility Project that was the subject of the ticker on Friday, working with NMC, CMU, and Munson, local drone companies as well. We're going to be one of the first places for drone-enabled water studies and rural health innovation anywhere in the country, which I think is pretty cool. Another example of that is the Great Lakes Blue Tech and Aqua Hacking Challenge, which is a competition that attracts entrepreneurs here to this region to work on problems related to marine technology and freshwater studies. So those are just a couple of examples of some of the ways we see our work overlapping with your priorities, and we want to be a partner in those things. Obviously, then we get to the issue of how do we implement this? And from our experience, as well as, you know, obviously the conversations that have happened in this room and with other local partners in the public sector, it does take a long-term focus and commitment with all the partners. It takes sometimes the willingness to challenge this and change the status quo, and then obviously sustained funding, right? So all those things are important. I think the last one there is probably the most important, is the collaboration with partners, both private sector and public sector, to get these things done. So to that end, we have, and it's in the packet for your review, provided a draft agreement, much in line with the previous agreements that the City Commission had approved in working with Traverse Connect. And we've tried in that agreement to outline the priorities that we've just gone through and the goals as they relate to what everyone in the region would like to see from an economic and community development standpoint. So the next steps that we would encourage you to consider would be, first off tonight, obviously questions from all of you and any clarifications you need on the information that we provided. And then over the appropriate amount of time, you know, providing feedback to us as to what you'd like to see in our priorities, in our reporting, in the draft agreement, and then eventually get to hopefully a final agreement, signed agreement on the development services, and then get to work with some of the strategy implementation that's specific to the city's goals, while of course always continuing that monitoring and reporting that we provide to all of our public sector partners. So with that, I'll pause and see if there's questions and further information we can provide to all of you as you consider this partnership request.
I have a question. Would you lobby on behalf of the city to help our legislators make good decisions about short-term rentals, for example?
That's an excellent question. And in fact, while we were listening to the earlier session, I sent to Commissioner Anderson and City Manager Vogel the policy brief that we had put together a couple of years ago that is related to short-term rental. And it actually was related to one of the bullet points that was brought up about helping the state to consider rules that may be changed so that the communities, especially in Northwest Michigan, that probably have the most acute challenges and issues and opportunities, frankly, with short-term rentals, we've tried to encourage the legislature to look at that. So I think what you'd see from that piece, for example, is we've already been working to further some of the priorities that you've already discussed, and we can continue to do so. You know, again, as the host of the Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance, it's not just Traverse City, right? We hear this from Petoskey, we hear this from Charlevoix, we hear it from Marquette, and so our job is to help those communities deal with this issue.
And I'll just add from a few years ago, because I think it came up at the time, but to that end, when we did get the workforce housing pilot passed, and both the Chamber Alliance, but with Traverse Connect at the forefront, really were major advocates down in Lansing to help make that happen. I met with the mayor of Marquette last year, and we had a conversation about that too, because they're also kind of in a similar situation of affordable housing from Michigan. Everything has lots of rules and opportunities, but that missing piece for service workers and things has always been an issue. So, you know, we have examples and further ones, but we did talk about that at the time, but we don't always bring that up when we talk about those workforce pilots.
Yeah, the workforce pilots, that host of legislation that got implemented with Housing North also being a key partner. that's an example of how when we're all working together collaboratively in the community, we can get things passed. I would say that short-term rentals is probably one of the more controversial issues in Lansing. So I don't want to say that it's going to be easy by any means, but certainly I think all of our interests largely align, and we can work together on it.
Other questions? Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks for the presentation. And I do support and believe in the efforts and what Traverse Connect does. Is your main goal, this might sound overly crude, but your main goal is to bring high-paying jobs to the Traverse City area, or something close to that?
So our main goal is probably best expressed with our mission statement, which is economic diversity and vitality that creates family-sustaining careers.
All right, so family-sustaining careers
Right.
tends to be higher-paying jobs, which you kind of allude to in here, professional, scientific, IT, technology. And this is kind of like Groundhog Day, because I think we had the same conversation one of the last times you were here. And I started by saying, I support what you're doing, but in bringing high-paying jobs to Traverse City specifically, we're shifting it. And so from an academic, high level, look at the statistics, yeah, GDP per worker, compensation per worker, that can all go up, and that's great. But we have humans, citizens, living here now that get low compensation, and we have a responsibility to them too. And the more pressure, so you can make up whatever thing about it, but that's where I hesitate to help. I fully support, yes, great, please bring high-paying jobs to the area, but the more we do that and spend $50,000+ a year to do that, we're not spending that money to help people that are living in the city right now that can use the help, and who, from a high-level academic standpoint, if you're successful, will look at it and say, oh, look, GDP per worker has gone up. But that teacher or nurse or whomever it is that's low paid right now through no fault of yours or ours, we haven't done anything for them. And so to me, that's a higher priority, is in this seat, what can I do to help existing citizens that tend to be at the lower end of the pay scale not exacerbate that? I don't want to exacerbate that, the first do no harm type of thing. And that's where I struggle with this. Again, love what you're doing, but I feel like my priority is how do I help citizens that are living here now, unless you've got a job training program or things like that. But we need nurses, we need teachers. The governor came up, I think, about groundbreaking in Grand to allow teachers to live there, which, yeah, that's good, but that's also horrible. Really, you got to live, nothing against Grand, but you got to live out there if you want to be a teacher in TCAPS. You should be able to live all sorts of places. So anyhow, I've gone on longer than I should, but that's where I'm at with it.
So I think what's great here, Commissioner, is that we're in 100% agreement. You just said a lot, and there's some really good points that I want to touch on. The first of those is the difference between what our mission is, which is family-sustaining careers, and high-paying positions. Those are not the same thing. So don't get me wrong, we want to encourage the development of technology jobs and higher-paying jobs, absolutely. But we're also focused on making sure that there's kind of that middle tier and even lower tier as well. So that's where the value of a public-private partnership comes in, because we're not, and you would see this sometimes in an economic development organization that's a standalone. For example, the organization called The Right Place in Grand Rapids is a bit more focused that way. Whereas what you'd see from us, for example, our Michigan's Creative Coast Job Board uses ALICE statistics to determine the ability of employers to list on the job board. And we do that because we want to make sure that there are those jobs that pay hopefully in kind of that $40,000, $50,000 range. And we want there to be more of those jobs. So absolutely, it's not just about high-paying, high-tech jobs. It's also about those, family-sustaining careers, such as teachers. We were the lead advocate getting the governor and other legislators to contribute that funding to the educator housing in Blair Township. That property was economically feasible because TCAPS already owned it, but importantly, it was always designed as a pilot. And if we can make it work there, TCAPS, the Catholic School, Interlochen, other partners have existing land that could see a phase 2, a phase 3, et cetera. So it's not about high-paying jobs. It's about family-sustaining careers across the spectrum. And as you look at, like, you know, our Creative Coast Job Board, you do see some things in, like, technology. You also see a heck of a lot of things at the college and Interlochen and in TCAPS. So we are actually providing and working toward those types of jobs, not just the high-tech ones.
That was a draw, so I'm going to say Heather first, then Mitch.
Yeah, I'm going to respond to that. I feel like the alternative to not looking for higher paid jobs, tech jobs, jobs that bring families here, is letting tourism run us over. And I feel like it's important to support businesses who have businesses and workers who really want to live here, and they want to stay here, and they want to have their children here. Tourism is just exploitative. You know, there's nothing that tourism respects, not anyone or anything. And it seems to me that trying to relying on tourist dollars to keep our economic development going is an inadequate response to our cultural and environmental legacy. If without those families, we won't have the teachers. You go to the UP, they have plenty of nurses up there. They have a few teachers, but there's nothing else up there. It's all sustained by tax dollars or state dollars. I mean, nobody really lives there. We want a vital community, and I think that we need that economic development to bring those better jobs up here for people to live here.
Thank you, Heather. Good point. Mitch?
I guess this is a clarification for Warren. When you say working on family-sustaining careers, that doesn't just mean on the career side, but helping in the broader community economic development picture to make the careers that exist to be more family-sustaining. Like healthcare and education are two of our largest sectors in the city and Grand Traverse County, but for teachers or nurses, it's important to make sure that we have adequate housing available, that we work to complete the child care picture, both of which Traverse Connect has been an advocate for much of the past few years on.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I would reiterate that we are industry agnostic, and we are not focused on only high-paying jobs. And Commissioner Werner, this isn't published yet. It'll be published toward the end of the month. But we did just finalize the data from our Creative Coast Jobs Board report, okay? So when that program started in 2020, 893 total job views in that year. 2024, we had 41,000 job views.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we do get a lot of interest from Houston, Texas, Dallas, Texas, Atlanta, Miami, San Antonio, et cetera. The number one user, though, of the job board is Traverse City. The number 8 user of the job board is Garfield Township.
Mm-hmm.
So there are those opportunities to provide those, again, family-sustaining careers that are not high-end. There are regular people, our neighbors, those kind of things. I'll read a testimonial here from one of the quotes that's in this report. I've enjoyed using the Creative Coast job posts to see the diverse opportunities in the Traverse City area. Recently, I found a great position with National Vacuum Equipment that I was interested in. I followed through to meet them in person at the Northwestern Michigan College Career Fair. As you all know, that's a job fair focused on entry-level or slightly above positions. met them in person at the career fair, applied, and got the job. So again, we try to provide resources across the income spectrum.
One thing I would say, just from observations here, and obviously, maybe my memory isn't what it always used to be, but I appreciated in this report in particular, or this update in particular, seeing the bullet point, just the focus on building the year-round economy, but also the bullet point of improved compensation and talent attraction, because I know it's a growing pain everywhere, but I know it's been a growing pain as Traverse Connect has reformed and become what it's becoming. It's still a organization that has businesses that are part of it, that are also a huge part of our economy, but it is that give and take of, as Tim pointed out, the jobs that are already here paying enough to sustain people who work here. And I think that was something that over the last few years we've kind of asked for, but maybe not clearly, of these examples. And so now we're getting these examples of, I know Traverse Connect was part of the, helping to broker everything with the TCAPS housing and out in Blair. And even if it's out in Blair, that's still a lot closer than Kingsley and other places. And, I think that we've seen some more examples too of everybody coming together a little bit more under, with some of this guidance that has been somewhat of a time builder, but also I think as you guys have refocused or rebuilt, where you've been able to put some focus. And so I will say that struck me this time around as something that was a little bit more defined, and we've seen more examples of that. I appreciated seeing of these tangible ways that it's not just attracting people with remote jobs or, a startup that employs 6 people, not that there's anything wrong with that, we love those too, but also the people who are already here working on housing solutions, still working on childcare, that's always a problem everywhere, but also some of these employment issues too, if you will, straight out. And I too know a lot of people who use that job board, and so very local. So I think I noticed that the pay threshold on the job board went up recently, even to kind of keep with that. I think it went from 45 to 50,000. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point out that without having been able to put my finger on it before, was something tangible that I appreciated in this report that maybe we hadn't been specific enough to ask for in the past. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you, Mayor Shammer. Yeah, I also wanted to echo on another part of the presentation that I think is really important, and that's this regional conversation, which was a huge part of what came out of our strategic planning sessions, and building this collaborative environment. And since I've been on board, even since last January, we started strategic planning. TCLP approved their strategic plan. The Unified Prosperity Plan started early 2024. You also have a new MPO that's bringing the townships together with the city, MS4 Stormwater, which doesn't just impact Traverse City, but also TCAPS and Northwestern Michigan College. And of course, we have big conversations of not just within all of those individual. Garfield Township recently finished their strategic plan, and Grand Traverse County. This is a heavy lift to talk to all these major issues that we're dealing with. And in order to have this regional collaboration, we need a strategic partner who's going to help get us there. And I really feel like the Traverse Connect is keyed in not only with all of these that I've just mentioned, but could help support us as we unveil the strategic plan, help us with some of our pillars. Of our 6 pillars, I believe they are squarely attuned with 3 of those 6. And that's the kind of support that we will need in order to keep this strategic plan alive moving forward. And having regular updates and having that kind of support, I think, will really be beneficial to the city moving forward.
Great. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, we don't have an Office of Economic Development here. What are we going to do? The county hired somebody last year, Maxwell Cameron, as a community development coordinator. Has anybody met him?
He was the finalist in the DDA search too.
What kind, is there a steering committee? Is there a core committee? What kind of seat does Traverse City have at your table right now, and what would it have with this larger contract?
Yeah, we're on the board, I can tell you that, because I'm the board member, but more seat is good.
Yeah, so we do have a designated seat for the city. Mayor Shamrow currently serves in that role. The county also is involved. Nate Alger, the county administrator, is serving in that role currently as the county designee. We also obviously work very closely with the Grand Traverse County Economic Development Corporation. That's where that prosperity plan, the draft prosperity plan is being developed. And that has representation both from the county and the city on that body as well. To your earlier point, I think it is worth reiterating that as we were even pre-2019, when Traverse Connect, the strategic plan was helped, kind of shepherded by the city commission. In 2017 and 2018, there were debates at the city commission about, do we have an in-house economic development staff, or do we work with partners? And at that point, the discussion, even before Traverse Connect was reformed, was it makes more sense for the city, county, other partners to collaborate on this, which is why we got formed, rather than to each have their own siloed staff person. We do work closely with the new staff person at the county. That's more of, that community development position is more of like zoning and planning collaboration between the townships. But we work closely with them, and Maxwell was involved in that draft prosperity plan that the county is reviewing right now.
And to that, I'm sorry, really, if I can ask a piggyback real quick. To that end, I guess one thing I'd put out there, and I think what this looks like, again, as this has become more of a formed thing, is, I think we were the first or maybe the second municipality or government organization to sign on in this kind of role. We have seen a lot more join since then, which is great to see. As we're kind of approaching that and even trying to maybe get more partners at the table in similar to us, I'd love to see, and this is just a 2-cent thing down the line, that beyond just, the governance committee and other committees is maybe, quarterly or something where us specifically of government or government utilities or some of these kind of more like-minded parts maybe have an opportunity to kind of hash out some of the things that are going on there, because I think that was kind of one of the appealing parts when in 19, when we started talking about this, was, and the position even that was suggested at the time, was having somebody who would kind of be able to be the neutral party to bring everybody together. And not even in a warring faction way, but just, sometimes it is as simple as this quarter we're going to somebody's place and this quarter we're going to somebody's. Sometimes it does need to be everybody sitting in the corner with their arms folded saying, you come to me, and having that, not that other entity that's involved in some of these economic development issues that can bring us all to the table on some of the stuff. And I'm not saying right now, but I think I've seen this grow so much and get so much stronger over the last few years that I'd love to see something like that evolve into whatever it might be, but having that little bit of focus, because that is becoming a bigger contingent, if you will, as part of Traverse Connect.
Yeah, and one of the things that came out, Camille detailed the half dozen or so meetings we did with all the townships, the county, the city, et cetera, in last year. There's a couple of things that came out of that you'd see in that draft prosperity plan, which is not just one convening, but several different convenings, ongoing, recurring, at several different levels. So at like a city manager, township supervisor level, and at a planning commission level, and at like a couple other iterations, so that all the partners are getting together on a regular basis.
Great. And then I think it was Jackie and then Tim. I think both of you. Okay.
Thank you. I would be interested in hearing more of your commentary regarding that Unified Prosperity Plan. I read it cover to cover, and there were some things that I winced at. Establishment of a joint municipal planning commission, establishing a regional municipal water systems authority, consolidating decision-making and oversight for road planning, maintenance, and infrastructure. Even the fact that according to the adoption plan, you were expecting, and I know this is a draft, but you were expecting the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners to approve it this week, and that individual municipalities had to actually repeal the regulation or the involvement by July 1st of this year in order to, or our approval and adoption would be presumed. And so you could look at that really skeptically and say looks like an existential threat. Or at least I would like to know who from the city participated in development and what the process was, and how did we get here?
So a number of things there. I think the first important point would be that that report was a culmination of those 7 meetings where we got feedback from, again, the 16 municipalities within Grand Traverse County. So that's not a Traverse Connect kind of recommendation. It's what came from those meetings. That would be the first thing. The second thing is those are, as you would see from that plan, which again is draft, would be that those are options to explore. So there's, for example, there's county-wide zoning and planning, which I don't think anyone supports, right? Then at the other end, there's zero planning and zoning, which again, not very many people support. So there's a lot of discussion about where's the middle ground there. So is there a way to have coordinated joint planning and zoning? Again, it's not county enforced. It's where all the planners and zoners from all the municipalities get together and discuss best practices, share definitions, and they discuss it, but it's not necessarily, it's definitely not the county telling the townships or the other municipalities what to do. So I think that's really an important distinction there. And then the third thing is that came from township supervisors, city manager, deputy city manager, Kingsley village manager, et cetera, discussing options. And then it went to the County Economic Development Corporation. And what the County Economic Development Corporation and county staff really want to encourage is participation in this ideation and the planning and everything that might come out of this plan, okay? So they were trying to figure out a way to get the municipalities to all participate without having each board have to formally approve it. So that's where that, like, the opt-out clause, as it were, comes into effect. However, as you are very well aware, that would have to go to the county commission first. And the county commission hasn't even reviewed it yet, let alone weighed in on whether they're comfortable with all that wording or not. So that's still very much a work in progress. In addition to the city manager and deputy city manager being involved in those discussions, Commissioner Stanley is on the Economic Development Corporation board, so she was involved in review of all the draft plans and all the material that went into that. And again, there's not consensus at the county commission yet on any of that wording yet.
Thank you. I was concerned when I saw that even the survey of municipalities didn't represent any perspective or any response from the city of Traverse City, and that it appeared that there were other significant players within the county, Peninsula Township, Whitewater Township, a few others that had not participated in that polling of identifying needs and wishes. So I guess I would appreciate some more information from our manager and our assistant city manager and Ms. Stanley to find out the input that they've contributed to that unified prosperity plan before I would be prepared to move forward on anything related to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think an important thing there is the survey was the first thing that went out in January 2024. At that point, you had brand new staff and a few irons in the fire, I guess is the best way to put it. But there was, again, 7 meetings after that had participation. I can't say the same for some of our other more rural municipalities who frankly don't want to be part of the conversation. They just don't. So that's their choice.
Could tell from their responses, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Tim?
Thanks. I had the opportunity to attend several, many, most, almost of the strategic planning kickoff meetings with Future IQ. And so I think I know the source of the word sustainable. You know, we have it in here in multiple places. You know, support community sustainability, sustainable future, city residents and all. And sustainable can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but in those meetings, it was all about climate crisis, decarbonization, and mitigation. And that's been a stated priority of the City Commission over the years to address that on behalf of residents. Any thoughts that you're willing or allowed to share as far as Traverse Connect being supportive of city efforts on these endeavors in the coming months and years?
So, number one, I would say that our board and our team see not only the environmental and societal need for that, which is deeply important and stands alone, there's also real business opportunity in it to develop technologies that can lead to more climate sustainability and environmental protections. So I think that the wording that you referenced comes specifically from Future IQ's that was the preferred future state that got the most support from the community. So that's where that wording comes through. But you know, our efforts, you know, we've got, as I mentioned earlier, the Advanced Aerial Mobility project that Camille leads for us is going to be at the forefront of using technology in water studies, as one example. The efforts that we've gone through with electric marine propulsion, right, electric boats, is again about reducing carbon use, and frankly, a lot of people don't realize, it's not just the carbon burn of fossil fuels in a marine environment. The leakage and seepage out of all types of boats is just huge in our water. So that's another aspect of it. And then, you know, we see a lot of opportunity with renewable renewable energy technology and battery storage. Obviously, there was the Lear expansion, but there's also some really interesting things going on. We've been approached by a group that, because of the unique kind of size and local control of both Traverse City Light and Power and Cherryland Electric, they're looking at like the opportunities for like an investment fund based on rural energy infrastructure innovation. So those are just a couple of things. I'll share this with you because it's personal to kind of your interest and your question. We got contacted by a young man who grew up here, went to high school here. He's doing some very interesting things in renewable energy and battery storage in Colorado. He's interested in perhaps eventually moving back here and starting a company along those lines. And the reason I bring up that story, even though it hasn't, we don't have anything tangible with that yet, he specifically mentioned you coming to his classroom in high school and talking about some of these things and that having an impact on the industry he's now in. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And again, it would protect the environment, which we really all want. There's also a lot of job opportunities and business opportunities in it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I just haven't heard it over the past many years. So thank you.
And Tim, you've got quite the legacy now. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, that is something I'm particularly interested in, and I did talk to Warren about it last year, about more opportunities for private-public partnerships with current and future businesses, in particular inviting innovation and science, or ecology science, into our infrastructure developments, like utilities. And this is not something that's brand new. There are other small, mid-sized towns around the country that have done this, like Bozeman. They use TIFs. Chattanooga, they're partnering with private and research sectors in their utilities. Asheville, Asheville is using, that hotels have to pay into public benefit funds to get permits. But anyway, I sat at a strategic, one of those strategic sessions with a township supervisor who said to me that he was there because he recognized that his township needed to work with Traverse City on infrastructure and housing, but he didn't feel that his constituents shared any values with the city of Traverse City. I see this as an enormous breakdown in communication. I think that we need to embrace any opportunity to work collaboratively with our economic development sector, with Aspire North. You know, if we're sitting down and talking on a regular basis, we're getting over these huge, dirty snow piles that have been sitting under the pine trees for years. You know, we have a sort of snobby attitude that we have that's grown up over the years, and we need to get over it. We need to work together, or we may get left behind.
Fair enough.
To the point you just made, Commissioner, about, you know, university research and development and technology in utilities, I want to highlight something that you and I have talked about. Tomorrow, actually, we're hosting a meeting at our office with a startup entrepreneur from a company called Blue H2O that specializes in water contamination remediation on an industrial scale. Done some pilot work with Disney, actually, in Florida. They're affiliated with U of M Flint and some of the water studies that have come out of U of M Flint. And so the professor, the startup CEO, are meeting at our office with Art Kruger from the city's utility team to look at ways that the pilot opportunities, test opportunities might be available in the water treatment plant and some of the other systems that the city has. So that's an example of, I think, some of the things that we can work on.
Mutually beneficial to both.
Agreed. Although I will say that I think, I just have to add the caveat, as someone who's lived everywhere from Grand to Traverse City, that I think that some of it is it's us, I agree 100%, the collaboration's better, communication is better. Some of it is just us getting out of our silos of those of us who have lived here our whole lives of preconceived notions too. And I think the more we do these collaborative efforts and the more we engage with more of the people, the better we will all be, because I'm a giant trash panda and I'm happy to go eat some Rico's fries and hang out anytime. So, any other comments from anybody? All right, well, thank you, Warren. I think this was a great presentation. Go ahead, Liz.
I'm just, and just maybe some consensus or some direction from the commission on the contract that was in the packet today. We are in our budget season right now. We are working on budget amendments for this fiscal year and, of course, the budget for the next fiscal year. So is there any feedback?
So I guess I would say maybe the question would be, is everybody has either looked it over or can look it over again? And this is what's being proposed for the budget or for the agreement that would then potentially be in the budget, and to maybe send feedback to Liz and help her get the gist of where we're at as we go into the larger budget conversation. Go ahead, Jackie.
I would add to that as with any professional services contract that reaches into six figures, I am in favor of issuing an RFP.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right, and then...
Are there any other commissioners that feel that way, or?
No. No, not me. So I have a bunch of comments on the contract language, so I'll just send those to you. Okay.
Great.
You could send them to me and to Warren.
And to Warren, okay.
All right, any other questions or comments now? Thank you so much for joining us tonight and for the presentation.
Thanks, we appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, well, unlike Commissioner Anderson's request, we're just going to do general public comment right now. So if you want to comment on the Traverse Connect presentation and or anything under the sun, we're going to open up for general public comment now. So feel free to approach the podium.
Justin Reed, Traverse City resident. So the last Monday's city commission meeting, I know there was some public comment about the R2 district. Oh, no, I'm sorry, the R1 to go ahead and make it R2. But at the same time, there was also discussion about safe harbor, and that there was a couple people there that said, well, we don't want a safe harbor, and we don't want something else. We want more housing. And then, but at the same time, you have folks that were opposed of like changing the R1 to an R2 zone, and because that would go ahead and that would change the characteristic of that neighborhood. So unfortunately, if you want any growth, you're going to have to change the characteristics of some neighborhoods around Traverse City. That is just something that's going to have to happen if you want growth. So thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Anyone else? I'll bring it back. Final thought, Commissioner Treadwell?
Yes, just thought to keep in all of our minds the folks to the north and east of us affected by the ice storm 2 weeks ago. It's now been 16 days since the first storm hit and the first outages started, and there's still almost 6,000 people without power.
That's a very good point. I know we've done some mutual aid with them, but also definitely sending our hopes for more speedy recovery. Anything else? I'm going to just clarify that I got a message while we were talking that, just to clarify because of something that was said earlier, the Planning Commission meeting tomorrow is a study session, not a vote. And the public hearing is on May 6th. And it very likely will not reach the City Commission in any way, shape, or form till probably, it sounds like June-ish at the earliest. So as we're asking for some of this information and asking staff to help us out, there's a little bit bigger window for us to work within there. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Everybody have a great evening.